Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to name and write formulas when they're all mixed together. And what you want to really ask yourself is, how does the name of the compound end? Does it end in the word acid? Does it end in the letters IDE, or does it end in AT or IT? And that tells you what to do. Okay, so we're going to start with doing the acid part of it, which is right over here. Does it have hydro in the name? So I'm going to get some pen, and I'm going to make it kind of on the thin side. Okay, so does it have hydro in the name? So yes and no. So what you're going to do is you're going to do H1 plus. You're going to drop and swap with an anion from the front of the periodic table. Okay, so you're only looking at the front. If it has the word hydro in it, it's only in the front. To give you an example, if I had hydrofluoric acid, it would be H1 plus. You would look up fluorine, F1 minus, 1 minus, drop and swap, HF. Okay, so that's not so bad. If it doesn't have hydro in the name, you're still going to do a drop and swap with H1 plus, because that's what makes it an acid, but a drop and swap this time with a polyatomic ion on the back of the periodic table. That's where you're looking. And if it ends in IC, you're going to use the 8 version. If it ends in OUS, you're going to use the IT version to drop and swap. And so again, the name tells you a lot. So if I had nitrous acid, I'm going to do H1 plus, and I'm going to look up nitrite, which is NO2, 1 minus, drop and swap, HNO2. Okay, if I had nitric acid, I'm still going to do H1 plus, but I'm going to look up the ATE version, which is NO3, 1 minus, drop and swap, HNO3. Okay, so those are your acids. And again, the name tells you a lot. So then now we're going to do the things that end in IDE. How does the name of the compound end? IDE. First question you ask yourself, are there any prefixes in the name? It is either yes or no. If there are prefixes, actually I have those backwards. Let's do a no here and a yes here. If there are prefixes, if you see prefixes, you're going to write down the symbols. You're going to use the prefixes as subscripts. The important thing is there is no drop and swap, no simplifying. Okay, so a good example of that would be dinitrogen tetroxide. Notice it ends in IDE, but it begins with those prefixes. So I'm just going to write down N, and I'm going to write down O. Di means 2, tetra means 4. That's my answer. No swapping, no simplifying. Just write them down. It's actually a lot easier than most people think. For this one, you want to identify the charges if it doesn't have a prefix in the name, and you're going to drop and swap. Okay? You want to watch out for those Roman numerals. So, for example, if I gave you sodium chloride, ends in IDE, no prefixes, it's Na, 1 plus, Cl, 1 minus, NaCl. If I had a Roman numeral, iron 3 sulfide, that Roman numeral tells you the charge on the one in front of it. So Fe, 3 plus, sulfide ends in IDE, look on the front of the periodic table, drop and swap, Fe2S3. Okay. The last group we're going to deal with are the ones that end in ATE or ITE. And you're going to use the chart of the polys on the back of the periodic table. But you want to watch out for ammonium. People have a tendency to miss that one, and people also get confused by hydroxide, cyanide, and peroxide. These guys are actually on the back. They are not one of the ones on the front like the previous one. So for these, you want to identify the formulas. You want to do the charges, and you want to drop and swap. And you want to keep the parentheses if the number outside is anything other than 1. Okay, so for example, if I had ammonium hydroxide, all right, I'm going to look at that and go, oh my gosh, it's IDE, and that's where I recognize, yep, wait a minute, that's on the back of the periodic table. It's NH4 with the 1 plus outside, OH minus with the 1 minus outside, drop and swap. And since the charges are 1, you could drop the parentheses or you could leave them in there. Either way, you could do it this way or with the parentheses. Either way is perfectly acceptable. Then if I had one with a Roman numeral, iron 3 carbonate, that 3 again refers to the iron. Carbonate, I'm going to look up because it ends in ATE, it's on the back. CO3, 2 minus on the outside, drop and swap charges, you get Fe2, CO3, 3. You have to leave it like that, and you have to include the parentheses in order for this to work properly. Okay? I'm going to turn over the worksheet, and we're going to talk about naming them. Okay? So we're going to start simple. First question you ask yourself when you're trying to name them, how many elements are present? The way you know is you look at capital letters. Okay? If there are only 2 elements, what you want to do is you want to identify what is written first. If H is first, means it's an acid. Okay, so you're going to want to end the name in the word acid. So for example, HF. I look at that, I see an H first, hydrofluoric acid. There are other examples, and I'm going to squeeze this one in and down here below. Oh no, that's not, I'm not going to do that one yet. Hydrofluoric acid. For these, you want to use the word hydro, because they're always on the front of the periodic table, because there's only 2 capital letters. So HF, hydrofluoric acid. Then the next question you want to ask, is it a metal first? Remember our staircase that divides them? If it's a metal, you want to name the cation, that's the thing that's written first, and then you want to name the anion, but you want to use IDE at the end. So there's 2 different examples of this because sometimes we have Roman numerals for these guys. If I had NaCl, I see a metal, I call it sodium. I see an anion, chlor, IDE. And that's it. If I had this one, Fe2S3, again, it's a metal, iron's a metal. I write iron. I name this guy sulfide. But one of the things you want to watch out for is those Roman numerals. So if I do the algebra or I undrop and swap, I would find that it is iron 3. Okay? So for these, you want to watch for the Roman numerals. Okay, the last kind is when it's not an H first and it's not a metal first, it's a non-metal is written first. In this case, you name the first element, you name the second one, and you add IDE at the end. So that case, it's very similar. IDE refers to binary compounds. And then you're going to use prefixes. So if I gave you N2O4, you would say nitrogen, oxide, but then you would say, all right, there's 2 of them, di, and there's 4 of them, tetra. Okay? So those are all the things with 2 elements. Now we're going to talk about what happens when you have more than 2. Okay? 3 or more elements. 2 possibilities. H first makes it an acid. Okay. If the polyatomic ion ends in ATE, you're going to turn it into IC, acid. If it ends in ITE, you're going to turn it into OUS, acid. Okay, so I'll give you two examples of this. HNO2 and HNO3. I see more than two capital letters. I see it starts with an H. That immediately tells me it's going to end in the word acid. And then I have to look this guy up. And if I look that up on the periodic table on the back, it's going to say nitrite, which means this is nitrous acid. I look this guy up, NO3 is called nitrate. I'm going to change the name to nitric acid. Okay? And then the only other possibility, and you do have to kind of watch for this, but I didn't have a whole lot of room on the paper for it, is when you have three or more elements, you want to name the cation. And again, it could be ammonium or it could be Roman numerals. And then you want to name the anion. Okay, so for example, this. I see three capital letters, iron. I look up CO3 on the back, it's called carbonate. And doing the algebra, I find that iron has a charge of 3 in this formula. Okay, you want to watch for that. Sometimes you can see stuff like this. Okay, NH4, people get really confused, they can't find it. You have to recognize that 3 capital letters means something is on the back. And this is ammonium. And then this, since it's on the front, things on the front in the word end in IDE, so it's ammonium oxide. So you got to kind of watch yourself as you're doing this and pay attention to how many capital letters, pay attention to how things are spelled. Be really careful with that.